1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastara hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka, with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times, keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. CEYLON Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. In 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastara hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka, with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times, keeps
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're back, and this is the pro race of the Race at Home Championship, round 3. We've split the two events, the Pro and the Am, to run on Friday and Saturday, and now you see us at Dragon's Tail, where we've got 9 competitors taking part. We've got a couple of issues, and we'll be back with you shortly. There's one or two competitors who've got a bit of a data lag. We'll be restarting the room. Meanwhile, let me give you a background of the whole thing, of how the esport takes part in Sri Lanka. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, esport at its best.
1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastara hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka, with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times, keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. CEYLON Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. In 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastara hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka, with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times, keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. CEYLON Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastara hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. CEYLON Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. In 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastora hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. CEYLON Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. In 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastora hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. CEYLON Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastora hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. CEYLON Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastora hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. CEYLON Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastora hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. CEYLON Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastora hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. CEYLON Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time.
Apologies once again, ladies and gentlemen. We've had a slight technical glitch with the data of one of our competitors. Unfortunate, and as a result, we've had to drop out on a few drivers. Some of them having issues with data, some of them having issues with health. But overall, we've got a wonderful 8 drivers here taking part in this Race at Home Championship Round 3. Pro class, we've got Viren Boteju on track, followed by Tiago Pereira, Angelo Senratne, Priyas Hafrat, Seshan Gunasekara, Brian Pereira, Mevan Pereira, and Kevin Pereira. So there you have it. We've got 8 drivers today who were vying for championship points here. And we wish to thank our sponsors, Lab 57, J Homes, House of Glass, and not forgetting Pit Pass. We've got all our drivers here. We ride on board with Viren, who's doing his first lap out, and Viren, the car of choice being the Nissan GTR. The circuit is once again the Dragon's Tail Seaside. It's a fantasy circuit as we ride on board with Viren, and followed very closely by Tiago also in a GTR. I think most of these drivers preferring to take the GTR as one of the most competitive cars. There you see Angelo Senratne, all the cars beautifully liveried to have all the sponsors logos. So it's pretty much a one make series from what I see. All the competitors in the different kinds of GTR or different colored GTR cars. First one across the circuit, across the track now, coming into the main on the back straight. We'll ride on board with Viren, and I'll walk you through the circuit. It's a long straight passing the pit. We are running in a clockwise manner as Viren sets his first competitive time of 1:27.798 as it goes into a hard braking left-hander down into second gear, third gear, upshifting there, takes the full width of the curbs, slight kink to the left, and you will ride on board here again flat out through that into fifth and down into second, hard brake into first gear, uphill here, and you go down blind as Sashan Gunasekara clocks a time of 1:27.516. Hard braking into the on fifth gear itself. Left-hander, right-hander, left-hander again. It's a sequence of corners. It's downhill and uphill. You got to keep the car nicely balanced as you go into a very long sixth gear. Hard braking second gear corner, right-hander. You got to get your braking right here, and the exit from this corner is vital for you to get a good run out of this into the chicane here, as one calls it, the first of the chicanes, the right-left chicane, as Viren gets it slightly askew there on the second set of chicanes and has a little bit of contact with the barrier. That's not really the ideal way to get around. Yet for all, he still is having the second fastest time for the day. We're right on board with Sashan Gunasekara as you see him there beautifully maneuvering his car nicely through that the second set of chicanes. Sashan, just 11 years old and driving from home. All these drivers, I'm told he's driving a Fanatec DD Pro steering wheel. Beautifully takes the car all the way using the full width of the curbs, and let's see what his timing would be. I'm sure he's bettered it there. No, he hasn't, but all due credit to him. He's only 0.03 of a second away from his initial lap time, as Viren is still holding fort in second place, very close. Followed behind is Thiago in third place. Angelo Senratna in fourth, having clocked a time which is about 5/10 or 1:28.109 being his fastest time. Brian Ferreira doing a 1:28.121. All these laps will be just, as I would say, installation laps, because these drivers would want to reduce the fuel load in their cars and then come in for a bit of a splash and dash with the tires. No fuel being loaded onto the car, just only the new tires. As Brian there, you can see him sliding the car around. That's not the ideal way around this circuit, but Brian, an astute driver, he knows exactly what he's doing. Three brothers today, Brian, Kevin and Mevan. Brian and Kevin both in Australia, Mevan in Colombo, and Riaz, as Dr. Riaz as we call him, our eye surgeon, is in 8th place. So as I said, you've got the front runners now have come in for a set of tires. We're right on board with Thiago as he comes in for a tire change. As you see it, tires in, out, no fuel being taken. I think may have been a little too early for his tire stop, but nevertheless, these guys know what they're doing. They've done tons of mileage on practice on this circuit, so they know exactly at what point they should come. There's only about 3 minutes remaining. They've got maybe 2 laps in it to give that all the curry that they can give. As Viren Botechu here, you can see him trying his darnest here to get a lap time which is competitive to what Sashan has done. Viren has not come in for tires. It'll be interesting to see what Sashan Gunasekara's timings are. We'll also ride on board with maybe Angelo. Angelo is a really good driver. He's into go-karts. As he goes through that left, right, left sequence, you've got to get it perfectly timed as you go uphill here, blind again into a right, left, slight left, as you come in on a 6th gear into a sharp, back again, hard braking here at 280 kilometers an hour into 110 kilometer or 100 kilometer second gear right-hander. You start throttling it out into that chicane here, right, you take your car full on the curbs there, full on the curbs on the left, again, and hard braking again into that chicane, beautifully balance the car. But Angelo might get better his time on this run, because it seemed to be pretty clean. As you see a car in front of him, Viren having come for his tires as well. It'll be interesting to see, because all these guys are running the identical car today, and you'll see the difference of timing between all these guys. So there you see it. Let's ride on board with Brian. Brian still seems to be struggling a little bit, and he's coasting. From what I see, he's on second gear. He hasn't changed. Maybe he's trying to burn some fuel by running on a high gear. His brakes are wondering what exactly is going on, because he's throttled full on the accelerator and he's got his foot on the brake as well. Not the ideal way to be on this circuit, but nevertheless, Brian knows what he's about. He's not changing his gears. He's on first gear at the moment. He may be trying to reduce his fuel load drastically by driving on first. As you'll see Angelo again trying his hardest there. The gap between Thiago and Viren, just 300ths of a second. Very marginal. You couldn't put a paper clip in between these two guys in the timings that they've got. Again, we've got Seshan or somebody who's done a faster timing there. No, it's not anybody we know. But let's see how it works. Riaz Hafrat, he's done much better. He's come 6th. Credit to Riaz there again. Riaz having got a beautiful line there. Whoa, made a right royal curry of that one. And unfortunate for him, he was getting on quite well there. And as Mevan Pereira sets a new fastest time of 1:27.926, and Thiago's time of 1:27.562, which puts him into 2nd place. Let's ride on board with Thiago. The gap, whoa, you couldn't put anything between these two guys. Thiago is now just 0.48 of a second between Thiago and Seshan. Brilliant qualifying session from Seshan and Thiago. The gap between these two guys is just 400ths of a second. Sam, what do you think?
It's gonna be a very toughie for these guys, because this is the seaside is a very fast track, just like how you were mentioning. These are 9 corners. We need to go left out each of these, and let's see how they're gonna face the first corner. If these guys are running, just keep in mind, if they're running the GR2 cars, they're powerful, they're more faster than what they were driving last season. These guys were driving the GR3s. 2022, they're driving the GR2 cars.
And while we were having that conversation, Seshan Gunasekara is the first of the drivers to have brought this lap time all the way down to 1:26s, 1:26.911. Brian Pereira, again having done the little trick that he does, has qualified and got a time of 1:27.111, and Kevin has got a time of 1:27.376. So there you see it, a brilliant lap time again. See Thiago 6/10 of the lap times of what
lap time is
1:27.564, and Angelo Senratna 1:27.615. So brilliant driving from these guys. The top really pushing it really hard. We'll have the race start in exactly 14 seconds, and it's nice to see these guys coasting along. Mevan hasn't really.
Seshan has done brilliantly. He has bettered his previous.
Yes,
fastest
as
lap.
I said, he's the first driver who's going to the 1:26s. So we wish all our drivers all the very best. And there you see it. These guys are flat out there. The drivers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We are missing 6 drivers today due to my multitude of issues, but we wish these guys all the very best. We'll ride on board in the middle of the pack with maybe Angelo or Viren. We'll see what exactly happens. Angelo being in the middle, so we see all the drivers there. The lights are on and the lights are off. Drivers doing a brilliant start there. We've got Kevin and Brian not really getting the best start here. Seshan, Thiago was in 2nd, gone down to 4th again, and back into Seshan, Brian, Kevin and Thiago, followed by Viren. All these guys driving the identical cars. So in the middle of the pack, there's been quite a bit of a clean run so far. We ride on board with Viren so that we can see them up the back as the cars all go up that long straight up into the left-hander. The first of the I wouldn't know what to call them, gizmos or chicanes or whatever you call it. They're uphill, and Seshan managing to scamper away with a phenomenal start as Brian is on the outside. Brian tries a maneuver on the outside, didn't really make it stick, but Brian is trying his level best to rattle Seshan at the start itself. Nice run here. Nice run by Brian. Brian trying his hardest there to give Seshan a run right from the start, as Kevin is also being hounded by Thiago. It'll be interesting to see because Thiago is also being hounded by Viren. All these guys trying their hardest. They don't want to give up on the 16 laps. By about the 8th lap, they're going to be coming in for a pit stop. I think Thiago had a very bad run out of the main straight. As you see, Viren down the inside. He's going to brake a little later than Thiago. Yes, he has, and taken the place away from Thiago. Thiago got a little sideways coming out of the main straight, and that lost him a place. But Brian, still the man behind the scene chasing, and his brother Kevin is now giving him a hard time. Thiago has gone down to 6th. There's something radically wrong with him, and Mevan is now on Thiago's tail. So there you see it, fastest lap 135.562. That includes the installation of the start, so that it takes a little longer. In the next lap, you'll see the cars dropping to the 128s, and you see Brian still being hounded by his own brother Kevin. So Kevin wanting to take this place away from the brother. Angelo now following right on the tail of Viren. Interesting times there. Kevin still trying his hardest to get past the brother. The brother not giving the door open. There you see it. Kevin having got the inside. He's got the braking line there. Brakes hard there. Gets the better of Brian. Brian might get the slipstream on this. This may be a bit of gamesmanship between the two brothers, but I don't know exactly what exactly is happening here, as Kevin does have the legs on the brother, and if Kevin does block the brother, I don't think Brian will have a chance of running behind Seshan. But Seshan seems to have got a 1 second gap, and Viren also coming to try to catch Brian. Yes, so the two cars a little difficult to identify. Both are red, but in 3rd place, in 5th place, we've got Thiago. Thiago now having been in 4th. I think he had a bit of a moment, and he's trying to catch up the leaderboard again. He's dropping his timings to Viren. Maybe he's made some mistakes somewhere, as he has a